Good morning, good evening, almost good night to everybody that are watching us. Welcome to a new edition of PWN Live Talks. We are talking today, as I already got used to it, about leadership, but now it's from a different perspective. Before entering to our discussion, I would like to thank to all our PWN sister city networks that are watching us. So hello. We are trying to discuss today about leadership from a different perspective, because nowadays, in the last few days, 1 week maybe, we are seeing a lot of examples of leadership, male, female, and if we look to our neighbors across the border, Romanian border, we saw in the last days so many leadership examples, male but also female, and I have in mind the deputy of defense minister, which is Hannah, and if I don't know her name exactly, I will say just Hannah because it's a different name. So she gave another leadership example. This is why I invited a very special guest and a very dear person to me. That is Hendre Coetzee. I said it right this time. Good morning to us and good evening to you. Welcome to our show.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so proud and honored to be with you in these incredible times to be able to share and answer some questions.
Yes, we will have some questions. Actually, it will be an open discussion for us. It will be a dialogue that I hope will cross the border of our online studio and goes in the offices and homes of the people that are watching us. So if you have questions for Hendre about leadership, and you will see about the challenges that actually feminine leadership need to overcome, we are here to discuss also with you. So we hope it's a open discussion over a coffee, either it's in the morning or late in the evening. So let's start discussing. I would like to say some few things about you, Hendre, for the people that don't know you in here in Romania. So you are a leadership architecture specialist, and this is the position that we are actually talking about with all the questions that we will have. But you are also the founder of the Center of Advanced Coaching, and you wrote a very interesting book that is 90-Day Turn System, a customizable, sorry, it's still morning to me, in-house coaching program suite. But we will discuss actually about your opinion and your advices upon the feminine leadership and the gender balance. So I will start directly with a question about gender balance leadership. So what is your point about it? We discussed about a bit about your point of view, but what is it for the people that are watching us? And is it this gender balance, is it a tangible fact that we have to consider in leadership or not?
Thank you so much for a great question, Alina. You know, I always react to the word balance, right? Because I think the word balance sometimes can provoke the idea that it needs to be an equilibrium. And, you know, and sometimes when you're trying to keep your balance, it always feels very unstable, right? When we imagine balance, we think about the person walking on a tightrope across, between two buildings, or between, a big open canyon, or the Cirque du Soleil trapeze artist are keeping balance. I like the word integration. I think when we recognize differences, it's important to recognize how these differences are able to be integrated in order to produce something better. I also think that perhaps another word that's interesting to consider in gender roles is the idea of polarity. And when I think about that, I think about feminine and masculine polarity, that all of us have both feminine and masculine traits within us. But if we were to make it very, very practical, I think that there is a need, and certainly there has been growth in feminine leadership or women in leadership in many, many different parts. As you said, here over the last few days, we've seen incredible leadership coming out of the Ukraine, and certainly the president has been an incredible example of that, as has a lot of different people and a lot of different genders. Women and men both are, showing themselves to take initiative, speak out, create an environment of change and shift, and being super agile in the middle of this. So yes, I think there needs to be an integration. I think that we're seeing more and more of that. The challenge with the idea of balance is that somehow when we hit equilibrium, that now it's right, and now then we're going to try and stay in that place. Whereas I think that there will be times when with integration, where feminine leadership will surpass male leadership, and that's going to be necessary. And there are other times where there's male leadership needed, and that's okay too. Let's take a look at an integrated approach, and especially for today, let's take a look at how feminine leaders could advance themselves and excel in this new integrated environment that we're going forward.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And also some studies, I think they agree with you, but they have a lot of work to be done. I've put out some examples of some percentages, and that from different countries, different studies. That is something that we will discuss about immediately, because there are a lot of disproportionate percentages in different countries, either in Europe, West versus East, or different percentages in the US or other countries from West. And some of these percentages, they are getting better, let's say like that. So we are improving the numbers. In 2020, for example, in Europe, there were about let me see the percentage here. For example, in France, they have 43% of board women ready, boards that have more than 3 women on board. Sweden has 38%. Romania, for example, has only 20% of the companies that have women on board, 3 or more women, or less, actually. So there are not they are okay percentages, but they're not at the right place. But also the US, as I saw, they have, for example, for the women directorship, they have in 2020 28% of the companies, and the companies that have more than 3 women, you are at 66%. Whether the France are at 100%. And Sweden is at 91% of the companies having at least 3 women on board. And I'm sure that these differences are because of the regulations in different countries. So this is what I would like to discuss. I don't know which is better or not. Maybe in your specialist opinion, you can provide with the plus and the minuses of different regulation, because Europe has all the countries that we said that they have higher percentages, they did the regulation by law.
Sure.
The other European countries are trying to follow their examples.
Right.
But in US, I know it's a different situation. So which are the advantages and disadvantages of both of the situations?
Yeah. I think regulation is important in order to make sure that society reflects the will of the people, right? That's ultimately what you want regulation to do. So regulation is important, and I think as society shift, it's important that governments are able to enforce the will of the people, or create an environment where diversity and inclusion really is happening. At the same time, when it's done by regulation, it often doesn't generate an environment of respect, because people often feel that they're in a position because of regulation, not because that person is actually competent or capable of doing that work. And I think some of the challenge for people who come into a highly regulated environment is they may get the position, but they're not getting the respect. And so part of the challenge then for the individual, in this case the female leader, would then be to overcome whatever bias there may be as a result of people thinking that they are there only for regulation. For instance, in America, here in the US, we don't have a lot of regulation around the amount of women that need to be on boards. However, there is societal regulation where obviously right now it's a very big thing, diversity, equity, inclusion. For that to be true in America, that's much more on a racial side than that is on the gender side. And so it's an important thing for companies to have women on the board, have people of color on the board, or have different racial integration on the board. But again, sometimes this is about the image or the brand that goes about, rather than the functionality and the good governance that the board then provides. Fortunately, there are great examples of incredible women leading in boards and leading companies, and being able to provide that leadership that is required on boards and to overcome that. In the US, it's always an incentive-based system, right? So, for instance, in the US, there are tax incentives if it's a female-owned business, or if there's a certain amount of females on the board or something like that. So it's not a regulation, but it's an opportunity for a company to be able to propel themselves forward, make more money, or get government contracts. So there are incentives. I think in that regard, uh, the US has an interesting frame around merit and around incentives. Now, listen, between you and I, incentives can also, uh, provoke greed, right? Because now people are only going after the incentive and they're not doing the right thing. So again, this is this interesting polarity between doing the right thing and being incentivized, and in the middle of this, creating a merit-based environment where women can excel in leadership, are offered the opportunity, but they're not only offered the opportunity because they are women, but they're offered the opportunity because they are great leaders and they have great leverage and value that they can bring to the board. So part of the work is dismissing the old notion that because somebody is a woman, they don't have as much leadership to offer. Fortunately, there's been such a great surge over the last 20 to 25 years of more and more women around the globe going into leadership positions, excelling, and creating leverage for themselves and for the companies that they're doing. So that respect is coming. So I think we're coming to a really great inflection point where merit is becoming a great opportunity for women to generate respect. The opportunity for regulation or incentives makes that the bias go down a little bit. But this is the platform. This is a real opportunity that I think should not be missed by women in leadership to excel, to provide great governance, and to set the standard. And so this is the time for women in leadership. Absolutely.
Yeah, hopefully it is like that. You said two words that are in my mind now. You said respect and you said merit. Both of them shows me about competence as well.
Sure.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm asking you, is there which of them it's better to actually to sustain also the competence? Because if we do the regulation, we are focused on this getting the numbers. If we go on the incentive side, we want to get the incentive and we are not doing the right thing. Maybe we are, maybe we are not. How can we integrate this? About saying your word, how can we integrate this, or can we find a mixed solution?
This, so what's really interesting, Alina, is when we take a look at integration, right? We're always looking at where are we headed. The only way to do this is and balance, by the way, if we're going to use the word balance, is achieved through momentum and direction, right? When I had the privilege of teaching my daughter how to ride a bike, I didn't teach her balance. I taught her momentum and I gave her direction, right? So when she has direction and momentum, balance is an outcome. So if we're looking to create an integrated environment between merit and respect, between regulation and incentives, between all of these things, we really have to think about two very important variables. One, where are we going? And I think as a woman in leadership, this is a really important question that you need to ask yourself. Where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? Even if there's no example out there, create the example for yourself. Design your own point B. When you have clear direction, then the key then is to figure out what's the rhythm and what's the momentum. Now, I personally think that right now there's greater momentum than there's ever been, but that doesn't mean you can't stop pedaling, right? So you, as women in leadership, this is really a time to pedal, to excel, but it's really important that you get clear about where you want to go. And when you declare it, and when you are willing to create that frame, I truly believe that these doors will open up. And there's been no time like the present to make it happen.
Okay, so if I understand it right, you need a direction. Actually, you need a strategy. I love this.
Yes.
If you want to know where to, what road to take, you need to know where to go. What's your destination? So in leadership is the same thing. So what is your opinion about being born leader or being taught to be a leader? Is there a difference? Are we born with some skills that we need to expand, of course, and train? Or some of us don't have a chance to be leaders because we cannot learn the skills? What's your opinion?
Well, I think if you really want to be a leader, you could be a leader. I think there are people who are born with certain personality traits that people view as greater in leadership. Certainly, charisma, the ability to be outspoken. But I have been very fortunate to work with people who are across the spectrum on personality, whether they're introverted, extroverted, people who are persuaders, people who love to not be on stage. In fact, I'm currently working with a company where of the 9 executive team, by the way, 5 of them are women. Of the 9 executive team, more than half of them are super modest and don't like to speak out, including the CEO. So part of my work is to help them, develop communication strategies. I truly believe leadership is available for people who want to lead. Now, it is true that some people are born leaders in the sense that they initiate. I think the very simple principle of leadership is taking initiative. But initiative sometimes comes from personality. But initiative that comes from a scenario that requires it is an even greater thing. If you take a look at what's happening just on the border of Romania, right, and what's happening in the Ukraine, there's a lot of people who are talking how phenomenal the leadership is of President Zelensky, even his wife, the Minister
Olga.
of Defense. All
Yes.
of these folks are doing amazing things. That leadership was birthed in adversity. Now, leadership can come from opportunity, leadership can come from necessity, and leadership can come from adversity, right? Leadership opportunity means there's a gap, you go take it. There's an opportunity in a market, you have a product, all of these things. Necessity, it means that something has to happen. So, I'll do it because nobody else is doing it. And adversity is when somebody who's even had bad things happen to them and really difficult things, and people rise up. And sometimes that's the amazing thing. We go through difficult times, and there's a resurrection that happens. That's a beautiful thing. And so leadership can truly come from not only from personality but from context. And I think this is what's excelled and propelled women in leadership, is because not only was there opportunity and not only was there a necessity, but definitely there has been adversity for women in leadership. And I think, honestly, in my opinion, this is one of the hardest things for female leadership or feminine leadership to overcome, is not the opportunity or the necessity, but some of the adversity that they've experienced before, and to rise above that and to move into what's next. And I think if you can rise in adversity, you can take the opportunity and necessity and capitalize on opportunity. There's amazing things available.
Yes, that's right. But in a normal situation, not in adversity, let's say where everything is calm that you find in a company and in corporations,
Sure.
calm, but better than these days. Um, there are a set of competence that you need to have as a leader, male or female, but maybe they are different. What are the main board competence that you need to have? There's a set of competencies or abilities that you need to have or to create for yourself, to train yourself with.
Yes. Well, let me set the stage a little bit for board conversation, Alina.
Please.
People get selected to a board for a very simple reason. At least, and I'm going to give you the U.S. context. It may be somewhat different in Europe, but in America, remember, America is and the U.S. is incentive based things, and certainly, the freedom or the liberty that we have here can also be seen as greed and opportunistic. And so, there could be a value judgment on that. But in the American context, the reason why people get to be on a board is because there's leverage that they have. So if you're considering being on a board, the question will be, what leverage do you bring to the company that will want you on the board? That leverage or that ability that you bring to either bring additional investment or to bring a certain set of skills or to support some governance or to bring marketability. You have to consider not only about your skills, but what's the leverage that you bring? What added value do you bring, that because the company brings you onto the board, it uniquely amplifies their capability to get results. And some of that leverage is not just your own skill, but it's the network that you have, it's the experience that you have, it's the know-how that you have, and it certainly is ultimately part of your personal brand that you have that's really important as a board member. But let's talk about those qualities or the skills that you had talked about, Alina, in order for people to be good board members. I think the first thing that's really important as a board member is the ability to communicate, right? And let's talk about communication, because boards, most of the time, are and board members are on that in that position for governance. Right now, governance is the ability to not only have the company be in compliance with regulation, but governance is about the ability to shorten the distance between strategy and execution. There's lots of companies that have great plans, but getting them to execute and getting them to make those plans happen is probably the most difficult work. And a board member's ability to communicate with an executive team and with other board members in order to activate strategy into execution is a really important piece. That ability to communicate internally and then also communicate externally. Of course, board members are responsible in a publicly traded company to also provide communication to the street or to the markets. And so that communication skill to activate strategy, to activate positioning, is a really, really important skill that needs to be developed. I would say a second thing that is really important in for a board member is the idea of impartiality. So impartiality is the idea that you can recognize when you are biased towards a certain way of thinking, or you are biased to a certain direction that you want to go. And a board member at that level is what you're wanting from them is to be impartial. And what's really important, why I think it's significant to have feminine leadership on a board, is because one of the most dangerous things on a board is confirmation bias or groupthink, where you're putting a lot of people on the board who all think the same. But when you have somebody who has got greater impartiality and they can communicate, it allows you to take a look at things from a different perspective. The next thing I think that's important, Alina, on this, and I know I'm talking a lot, so please feel free to just jump in and ask
No,
questions.
I like listening to you because I still have questions. Do not worry.
I'm sure you do. I think the next thing is relevant skill and experience that people have, right? And so that relevant skill could be either having been an executive, so that could be a relevant skill. It could be a stage of the business, so you've worked in a business that has at the same stage either a growth stage or going through a transformation, going through mergers or acquisitions. So stage of the business model, so you have experience of that particular business model, whether it's service or product or SaaS or whatever that the business model may be. And so if you have relevant experience, I think that ultimately puts you into a position to be on that board. And I would say, probably the strongest one would be the ability to leverage your influence, whether that's influence on the board or influence externally into the market, or if you're going to be the chairperson of that board, you really have to be able to exert your influence over the executive team in order for them to be able to optimize their ability to execute on strategy.
Okay, having this in mind, Hendre, do you think that women have sufficient, in sufficient extent, this kind of competencies?
Well, I think that there's no reason why they shouldn't, right? I think one of the
I'm just
biggest
asking.
no, no, I think women have, personally, I think women have the same skill sets in these domains than men have. Now, do you have the same experience, right? And we know that over the last 20 years, more and more women have had more experience, and it's been harder, certainly much more difficult for women to get into executive positions and get there. I will say that there's, a couple of things that women need to overcome um, in order to be on boards that I think is unique to women, and different for men in leadership. Men in leadership often are regarded for their experience and not often treated with the same amount of disconnect or disrespect or even suspicion than women are when that comes to their leadership. So for a woman to overcome, there are three different, kind of levels of challenge that I think women need to overcome in order to get to the board. The first one would be societal, right? Where there's just not that many women on boards. As you take a look at these studies, it certainly is growing, and some countries it has excelled, or it is at uh, a significant number, like France and Sweden, for instance. Those numbers are great, but many places that is not true. So I think we're certainly at a place where society is much more open to this. But as you shared with me, Alina, in Eastern Europe, there's still an old school mindset that could be very challenging to overcome, but it can be done. And the second one is a business experience. And to get on a board, it's always important to have a relevant business experience. And then the third one, which I think is very challenging for any human being, but in particular, I have noticed with some of the women in leadership that I've had the privilege of working with, is the personal one. Overcoming, our own fears and the difficulties that women get to deal with. And I think in what's uniquely so for women is that the more advanced the woman excels in leadership, the more polarized people become to them, and that's a very difficult thing to do. I think we've often heard that's lonely at the top, and I think it's even more lonely for women at the top, just because there's not a lot of other women around for them to do. So the type of work that you're doing with PWN is I think significant and really important.
Yes, indeed, we have in PWN Romania and global, but I will talk about Romania, and I invite our colleagues from the other city networks to step in if they please, with different other examples. We managed to create actually here two of the most important pillars that hopefully will help or support women that wants to get in a top position leadership and on boards to overcome some of these challenges that I would like also to come back to them and to point them, and then to point how then which are the solutions. But here in PWN we have two programs. One it's about mentoring,
Mm-hmm.
and we have different levels of expertise both on the mentees and the mentors. So there is not just you are board ready and you don't need a mentorship. You still uh, can learn. So we have this. And we also have a pillar that it's dedicated to women on boards, where they learn also the hard skills but also the soft skills. And my colleagues also started a mentorship program within the women on boards pillar. So to have a mentorship dedicated to this kind of project, let's say. But what I can understand from what you said, Hendre, is that one of the most unique challenges is actually our own mindset.
Yes.
Okay, can we point out, I don't know, okay, from the society I can understand that it's the global mentality, that it's almost in our DNA, as we already discussed, because we were taught like this. Women has a different position, and it's even harder in Eastern Europe because of the educational system. We are still we are heading there, but it's a long road. But on the individual side, I understand that it's the most important thing that we need to overcome. So let's say three unique challenges, and then to find solutions, or to give the women that are watching us solution to overcome that. Maybe some of the solutions are very basic and very on your in front of you, but you never see them because you are busy trying to point out different other competence that you have. So let's see if we can help them.
Sure. Alina, so it's always situational, right? When you're talking about personal uh, belief systems that people need to overcome. And when you say to me, well, it's especially hard in Eastern Europe. If I were to work with you one on one, um, you know, as a coach, my work is to certainly, on the one hand, allow for your argument to be true, right? Because there's evidence around it. You could show me all the studies. You can show me how in Eastern Europe, it is harder for women to be in leadership, and it's you don't have the same examples that are there. So the challenge is, if you're right, and then you become so right that what you believe to be right becomes the very limit. My job as a coach is then to have you see an alternative truth. So, for instance, what else is also true? So in that conversation, it would be to ask, well, in Eastern Europe, where are the examples of women that are excelling? Where are there examples of women who are in leadership and who have become board members? And part of the strategy for me as the coach is to validate the argument that you have, or recognize the argument that you have about what is so about Eastern Europe and women in leadership, but also create an alternative opportunity for you to pursue. And the moment that we have an alternative way of thinking, even if that alternative is, what would it take for you to be the first woman in Eastern Europe, or the first woman to be on a board? Because maybe somebody in your program is looking at this and says, "Oh, Hendre, yes, there's always examples of anomalies, but not in that will get them to take an action that they have been unwilling to take up until now." You see, when we're working with people, uh, we often think that if we can get them to think better, or think different, then they will act different, right? So I'm trying to change their mind so I can change their behavior. I want to get from the head to the hand. But before I can drop from the head to the hand, it has to go through the heart, right? Or the belief system. So I can help you think different, but if you don't believe different, you're not going to act different. So part of our work is to help people believe differently. We often personalize our reality as if it's the only truth that's available. And you know what? Sometimes you're correct. Sometimes you will have to be the first. And so the only way to break through that truth or reality that is so, Hendra, you don't understand what it's like to be a woman. You're right. I have no idea. And I've never been one and never had a feeling to be a woman or anything like that. However, I have a daughter and she's 16 and she's a phenomenal young lady. And so I'm 100% committed to participate in the world in such a way that will generate the greatest possibility for her. So, whatever work I get to do with you, Alina, or with any woman in leadership is my way of generating something into society that will pave a way for her so that she can have a different opportunity. So, I believe. So, back to how do I overcome a personal belief? The first thing to do is to recognize my own limiting belief. And as a coach, I validate the fact that that could be true for somebody or that is their experience. And then we create an alternative belief or an alternate what is also true. Maybe that's the anomaly. Maybe it's the one in a million or one in 5,000 or one in five. That is true. We pursue that and we lean into that. And if there's no anomaly, if it's never been done before, we invent it, we create it. So much of the work that I do, and if you're an executive, you're a leader, you know that where you lead is in uncharted territory. If you're leading a company, you are taking a company where it's never been before. And so that is a very simple fact of leadership. You are always going to have uncharted territory. So we can't complain about it. And as a woman, maybe it's you've never been on a board or there's never been a female on a board in the industry that you're in. Fantastic. We're inventing it. We generate a point B and then we design the strategy. Now, often what people want to do is they say, give me the strategy and then I'll decide where I'm going to go. And, that's like having a roadmap and not having a destination. Choose the destination. It's like when you get in the car and you put the navigation on, the first thing that you do is you put in the destination. And then the navigation automatically calibrates the roadmap there. Your destination determines your strategy. So, as a coach, I'm going to work with you then to recognize your current reality or your current belief system, and then we'll design a new one. And then you'll have the challenge of having to choose. It's both empowering and challenging to have two options because it's easier to be a victim. But when you have an opportunity to choose, now you have to go do the work. And the closer we can bring point B, the closer we can bring the strategy to a day-to-day action, the more likely it is that you will take that action. And that's the work ultimately, to have somebody break through their personal belief system by creating an anomaly, exploring the anomalies, and designing a strategy out of that.
I like the part where you said it's easier to be a victim because I agree with that. And often women are the victim of their own mindset. So I'm happy that we point this out, that we can actually change this. But my question is, what do you think? Is it empowering, or sometimes it's overwhelming to have examples of women that actually were the pioneers and broke the glass ceiling? How do you thought this in your work?
Yeah.
With this kind of examples, because they can be overwhelming for normal society, you know, you said, okay, that woman did it because A, B, and C. I cannot do that. I'm not there.
Right. So they were special somehow,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And or their circumstances were special, or maybe something was the anomaly that made that an availability. It's interesting to have a conversation with someone, and I think there are a couple of unique things, and I think this is an important thing. At least I would say, again, this is US context, so I don't know the bias that there is in Europe as much, and this is more questions that I would have for you. But Alina, in America, often when a woman decides to rise up and lead, uh, one of the challenges that's there for them is that it it breeds greater resistance often than men when they rise up. And one of the challenges or the judgments that are on women who rise up and lead is that, oh, here's an angry woman, right? So when they become strong, suddenly they're angry because men and society doesn't always know what to do with a strong woman. So how can a woman, and I get to talk with a number of my coaching clients about how do I remain strong, resolute, but also feminine, right? And and my question is not, well, what does society think, but often, what do you think? Are you angry? Are you angry and therefore you're reactive, or are you being strong? How could you say it differently? Because often we can't take responsibility for the rest of the people in the room. We can't change their minds, but we can change our own behavior and our mindset. And so part of the work that I do is certainly to recognize and validate that it's true. It's true that that there is a bias against women who are strong, that they're angry, or you know that they are uh, you know not feminine, right? I mean, there's all kinds of crazy words that are used, and I don't know which words are appropriate in the European context. But you know part of the challenge for a woman is, how do I remain strong? And if I'm feminine, am I seen as weak? Or how can I take feminine leadership and lead in a powerful way? Is there a way to manage the conversation? And every time we get into this conversation, we start off with a very simple question. What's the objective? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Right? If we're clear about what you're trying to accomplish, then we can figure out a number of different ways. But certainly it's true that if a woman rises up, it will automatically create greater resistance. And what's interesting is there's resistance from men and resistance from women in when a female leader rises up. For men, often when they rise up, there's a resistance from competitors or other people who also want to be more alpha. So I do think women uniquely have the challenge that when they decide to excel or initiate, it automatically generates resistance because people sometimes have this confirmation bias. And we can't manage how they operate, but we can manage how you, as the female leader, how you operate, and what is it that you're trying to accomplish in that environment.
Okay, this raises me one last question, short, but I think it's difficult,
Okay.
about male and female. And you said about biases, and I wonder whether if women biases more women than men do.
Yes.
And do we need men's support? That is a
I will tell you that.
supportive question.
So, um, at the current moment, I am probably coaching uh, 16 women who are in leadership positions. So they are in the C suite. And Alina, I would say more than 75% of them have told me it's easier for them to be friends with men in business than it is for them to be friends with women in business.
How come?
Well, they so again, I can only tell you the US
I
context,
have
right?
an answer for myself, but I'm challenging you to say the answer.
Yeah, I know. Women see other women as threats
Hmm.
way more than men do. Men see other guys as threats, and there's a competitiveness about it, but it's much more so for women. Now, part of that could be because there are so few women in business, right? So now you feel threatened and you start playing a zero sum game because the world is small, and you make the world small because you feel like you've had to rise up and you had to be protective of yourself. I think women attack each other in a much more personal manner than men do. Uh,
Okay.
and I think that also is not always true. And so I think that it's very challenging for women to establish relationships in business sometimes, and even with men, because I think if a woman is too friendly with guys, then they get the wrong idea, and if they're not strong enough, then they're not then or then they're not seen as strong enough, right? So it's a very challenging environment for women to be strong in leadership, and I think that's been part of the conversation that keeps
True.
women stuck.
So actually, it's about owning your power,
Hmm.
discovering and growing your power, and then own your power. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think, or as you explained, actually, it's natural for guys to be in competition because this is how it's been from day one. But it's not so natural for women to be in competition, and this is why now we put ourselves biases mostly among women than men to women.
sure. But part of the work that I do, and what I truly believe is, if you decide that you're not competing with other people, but your objective is to lead,
Mm-hmm.
then that conversation changes significantly, because part of what gets us locked up, whether we're male or female, is our own belief systems about competition or about other people. Right? At the end of the day, in order for you to as a woman to excel in your leadership, you have to overcome your bias about the bias, your own belief system about belief systems. And it's not going to happen because society is going to change. You don't have the time to wait for that. So the key is, how do you rise up in the midst of this? And that, I believe, is truly the work. I will say this: I think women have become uh, so much more recognized for their leadership than they have before, and I think women are more assertive, and certainly take a lot of their ability to a whole new level. Here's a challenge for both men and women to get into a board position. A board position is no longer about you attaining the highest position in the company, because that's the CEO or that's the senior executive. A board position is much more is a very, very different type of environment. A board position is about leverage, it's about influence, and it's about maximizing a collective environment. So negotiating skills, enrollment skills, the ability to create agreement, the ability to diffuse arguments and bring people along, moving from trying to be right all the time to being connected and being able to shift a room, not through argument, but through being able to generate consensus or being able to provide direction. This is an incredibly different skill set than it is to be the strong leader or the person out there. And I think that there's an enormous amount of innate skill sets that women have that are not always employed or deployed, that makes them uniquely powerful to be on boards. And I think that we're in for a time where if you're committed to it as a woman in leadership, you have the opportunity to use some of those perhaps underutilized skills in a way that will make a big difference in society and in your business.
Okay, it was a really interesting approach, like our viewers said also. I got my notes, which are great. We are actually heading to the end. So I have one more remark or maybe question, because here in PWN we actually have this idea of men supporting women to advance in leadership. Therefore, we call you and you also, Hendre, because you are here, and so you support us by saying all these challenges and how we can overcome them. Ambassadors. Do women need ambassadors in order to break the ceiling?
I don't think women need anything, right? I learned this a long time ago. But I think women, I think we are better together. And I think that an integrated approach is always better. I think the idea that a human being could become a great leader by themselves is ridiculous. And so, the fact that you're focused on gender-based leadership is a wonderful thing, because I think women can learn from each other in a way that is really, really important. At the same time, if you're going to want to be in a society that is with men, of course you're going to need the perspective of men. You're going to need men to own up to their contribution to the way things are. So, in that sense, I think there's great value for men to contribute to women leading. But do women need men to lead well? No, the only thing that you need to lead well is to be clear about who you are and who you want to become, and take the step in that direction. And great leadership is always determined by one very simple thing: who's following you. If you think you're a great leader but nobody's following you, you're just out for a walk. A great leader has followers. So it's not your great ideas, it's not your wonderful initiatives, it's your ability to bring people along that will determine your leadership.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Few last words from you, like a brief, in few words, what would you like the women and men, hopefully, that are watching us want to remain after our conversation? What's your message to them?
Well, Alina, thank you. Well, firstly, thank you for the opportunity for today, and the opportunity for you and I to chat a little bit around this. I think that, in particular, our conversation was really about women on boards and how do you get onto boards. Uh, I think that, of course, having the skill set, having the background or the experience in growth stage companies, or the stage of the company, is really important. But learning to lead not from your position, but learning to lead from leverage and maximizing that leverage by creating agreement is a really important skill set. We don't have the time to explore everything about that, but I would say this: your leverage comes from your network, from your experience, and from your ability to generate value in a group context. If you can maximize those things, there's an amazing opportunity, I think, for women to contribute to boards and bring unique perspectives that will only come from women, and we need them. So let's do it.
Thank you very much for being here and accepting my invitation, Hendre. Hopefully, it was interesting approach to all of us, all of the person that watched us. I wish you a good night, because it's 12 o'clock there, right?
1 o'clock in the
One
morning.
o'clock. Oh yes, Jimena. Leverage, network, and influence are the keys. It's one of my mentors in PWN. So.
Mhm.
A lot of women agree with you. Again, thank you very, very much. I have a short message upon your last words that you said about leaders have followers, and this is my ending speech. Um, Sometimes we need to have more small level leaders to follow, not only a higher rank one. It's harder, and I see this in the last few days, that people react to a peer person that becomes a leader, and it's easier for them to follow. So please follow the small network you have, leader, in order to make a huge change in this humanity crisis. Please do that. I will do so because my phone it's ringing for 1 hour now. I need help. I need help. I need help. So I'm gonna do that part of mine. Thank you again, Hendre. We will meet again with a new edition of PWN Live Talks on 15th of March with a different discussion. Until then, I wish you a peaceful, actually, spring, because today it's 1st of March and we celebrate. I think we need to pray for a peaceful spring. Thank you, Hendre. And I also thank to all the partners that are supporting us. Have a great day and a peaceful week. Goodbye.